Democratic State Representative Rhetta Bowers, you are running for Congress now in the 32nd District.
Yes.
And so thank you so much. I wanted to know, why are you running? What is the basis for your campaign?
Thank you, Jack. The basis for this campaign and the reason that I'm running is really to provide leadership that has been proven in the State House, that will make sure that people are taken care of, that will provide a voice in Washington, really carrying the voices of the people to Washington to make sure that they have the things they need. And I want to be able to bring the pragmatic approach that I always have. That's one of the things that I really took pride in. And I think in the State House, my colleagues for sure noticed that I was going to vote my district always, that I took the people's voices there with every vote and would not sway. I think one of the things that definitely gave me pause is because I was trying to think more about self. My mission has always been service over self and the people over politics. And so once I started to open myself up to really what I a lot of times would even ask my staff is, what are the people saying? And when I got home from the regular session, my constituency and supporters all across the region, whether they were community leaders, electeds, or just regular citizens, everyday voters, were coming up to me, reaching out to me in all kinds of ways and asking me to do this. And when I came to the realization of what the people were saying, is that they certainly were asking me to run. I try to not think about what people in Washington were saying, because it's what the people have been saying that's really mattered the most. And this is what got me to this decision. Once I put service and the community over self, I really saw that there was a need for someone like me to come to the table to make sure that I had a seat at the table and could bring their voices and stand up for them.
I wanted to ask you, because this was a change, right? Because at the initial offset, you said you weren't going to run, you were going to run for re-election for your seat in the House, in the State House. And so I'm wondering, aside from the pressure, from people in the community, what was it in your head that said, because you're giving up your State House seat to run for Congress? And so I'm wondering, what was the spark that got you over that hump, if you will, to make that change? Because you're running in a very crowded field now.
Sure. Thank you for that. And it was a lot to think about. As you said, a crowded playing field, so much being at stake, whether that's giving up my seat and the people's seat, certainly, that I sit in and serve in. But, being so close to being vested in the House and just all the work that I had done there, I had to really, really think about it. And there were some conversations that were had with community leaders, former and current members of Congress, that said, hey, we really think that you could win this and you need to really strongly consider it. And I gave every reason why I shouldn't. Every reason why I shouldn't. And I saw some strong reasons coming back to me every time. But I will say that really there was a constituent and supporter that said to me, if you get in, it will make my choice so much easier. My decision will be easier. And I took all these things into consideration. I did take a little bit of time to close the voices out. I wanted to close all the voices out so I could clearly think about it. And there was a day that my soul really said yes, that get ready for the type of service at a higher level that you will be able to bring and provide. And if this is being asked of you, whether that's from a higher being, the community leaders, people from Washington, whomever, then you have to consider it and really, really look at making a decision to say yes.
And one of the members of Congress, or former members of Congress, I think you're alluding to, is Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson.
Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering what impact did her, did she reach out to you? And I'm wondering what kind of impact that may have had, her conversation with you, on your decision.
You know, when I talked and spoke with her, I certainly said, I am considering this, but I just want to hear from you. And I think that it settled all, if there were any barriers there when I called her, because I did call her. I said, I am considering this, but I want to hear from you. And it was that statement that gave her an open door, surely, to share. And I will say that throughout the summer, it was probably the better part of 2 months that she just poured into me and explained to me why. And every time I tried to tell her no, she pulled back, and then she said, but if you look at it this way. So she clearly was trying to make me understand that there's a real great chance that I could win.
So there were multiple conversations.
Multiple.
And why do you think you are the best? As I said, this is a very crowded field. What makes you the best candidate, and what do you believe is your path to victory in the primary?
I do believe that as I represent House District 113, I represent everybody in the district, even those that may not agree with me. As you know, the community work we did with flipping this district, everybody wasn't with me at first, but one thing that supporters and constituents have told me along the way is even if we don't agree with you, you listen. I think that is one thing that I bring to the table, that I am going to listen to you, I'm going to hear you, and I'm going to bring your concerns to the table. I know also that I have an ability to remove myself from the equation and realize that just as this run for Congress is bigger than me, that a lot of times those issues that we're tackling are bigger than me.
And you entered the race last month, and I'm wondering, how concerned are you that your late entry puts you at a disadvantage when it comes to raising money? Because you've got announcements just in the last couple of days. Julie Johnson, another state representative from our area, she's announced that she raised over $300,000 in the third quarter, bringing her total to over $715,000. And just this morning, Brian Williams, another candidate, announced that in the third quarter he raised over $350,000 for a total of $716,000. So how concerned are you that you're behind when it comes to fundraising and your ability to get the message out?
Well, that is something that you have to think about. But really where I try to keep my focus is on what I am going to do and what I'm committed to do. And so I realize, and people in this community may know, that I've never stepped back from a tough fight. So coming in late, thousands of dollars having been raised prior to my entry are all things that I had to consider, but I had to dig in and be ready and willing and commit to raising the money that I can. So I'm going to continue to raise the money that I can. I realize that I don't have to outraise them, because if you recall, in previous cycles, I've been outraised and outspent, and I've won. So I have to raise enough money to make sure that I can get my message out. And I think from what you just said, it is about raising enough. So I'm going to definitely do my due diligence to bear down, as I have from the moment I started letting people know that I was committed to doing this and dedicated to running a clean and strong and viable race, to doing that. And so that's where I am with it. I mean, it's not something that I can ignore, and I won't, but I certainly know that I have to just do my best.
So let's talk about policy. What are your 3 top priorities if you are to be elected?
I think they're largely what they have been. I think one thing that we do have to look at is reducing cost. Reducing cost when it comes to prescription drugs, something that I've worked on and supported on here in the State House, but also making sure that there's affordable health care. Making sure that we look at inflation, and so bringing costs down all around. I do think that we have to look at education, making sure that it's affordable. We're going to have to look at the fact that student loans, families are faced with that, and so those are some of the issues that I'm definitely going to be looking at. But certainly going in, just as I did as a freshman in the State House and wanting to work alongside my colleagues. I will say I went in as a sponge and as a student, and I learned all the way through. Not sure that I learned nearly enough or learned it all, but I've been told from a sitting congresswoman, Rhetta, you will learn. You will learn just as you did at the State House. So, when I look at it, it's really going to be really making sure we've got health care, we've got an economy that is strong, we've got education that is affordable and gives people the quality of life that they deserve.
And you're talking about higher education.
Absolutely.
So what do you think that Congress can do? Because you mentioned loans and stuff like that. Obviously, there was a lot of controversy surrounding the president's decision to forgive loans, and the courts, they're not going to allow it. But I'm wondering, what is the solution to that? I mean, people sign these loans, they know what they're doing. So what's your solution?
That's a hard question, because I, like many other families, my family faces the same thing with student loans. We've had 2 children go through college. And when you look at loan forgiveness, I mean, that gave people in America great hope. It really did. I can say that. But certainly I think people want to know that any solution that we can come up with, that it's a real promise, and it's a real promise that will be kept. I think right now, when you look at the way things are, people have been strung along, and they're not getting the answers that they need. So I am going to be willing to go in and work alongside my colleagues and to make sure that if we can do something great in if it is loan forgiveness, that will be the solution that's given to these families. Because right now, everything, as you said, it continues to be up in the air.
Inflation. What do you think Congress can do to bring prices down? I mean, it has eased, but some prices at the grocery store,
Yes.
They're still expensive. I mean, maybe in the middle, of the store, not necessarily produce, but everything else. And people are very unhappy about that. When you look at the polls, people are very upset about, how expensive things are.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at mortgage rates going up, gas has come down, but just the overall cost of living seems to be higher for people.
And that, I believe, stems from the supply chain issues that we had. And I do believe that we are just going to have to certainly look at investing more in our small businesses. I think that small business owners are having a real hard time. And when we look at what happened as we went through the pandemic and the supply chain issues were certainly there, we haven't truly recovered from any of that. And I do think that we will have to look at how we do that, and I'm willing to work with my colleagues to try to find those answers.
Let's talk about the border. As you know, this has been a huge issue here in the state of Texas. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are as it relates to just the situation, the federal government's response, and what you think the solution is there.
Well, I will say this. I currently serve on Homeland Security and Public Safety and the Speaker's Select Committee for Community Safety. I have taken a trip to the border and certainly will take more if necessary. I do believe that we as a state have to do better by the immigrants that are seeking asylum and make sure that our borders are not just left open, but certainly there to receive these people and to help them. This is one thing that I asked about on the many border trips that were taken. Whenever I was there, I certainly talked to them about the inhumane acts and what was happening. Now, with the buoys there, I certainly think those have to be removed. I don't believe that it is building a barrier. I do believe that we have to be more open to helping these people enter the state, find safety, find quality of life, and all those things. So I do believe with the federal response that they're certainly trying to help in those ways, but I've always wished that as a state we could figure out how to work together on this issue.
If you're going to Congress, it becomes, a lot of people say Congress hasn't acted and that Congress needs to act. Certainly the president has said that, past presidents have said it, and yet there's really nothing that's happened. So I'm wondering, what do you think the federal government's response should be?
It's a tough situation when you think about immigrants being bused, sent to other areas. And I don't want to say that I believe the federal government needs to come in and do something, because I certainly believe we need to address it here as a state first. But if we can't, then that is when there should be a federal response. And I think when you look at it, people aren't happy with the way we're responding to it here in Texas, right? So at that point, I do believe that we may have to have some kind of federal response.
So you don't believe the federal government is the first government that needs to act?
When you look at the state of Texas, those are our borders, right? So we should be helping people that are coming to our borders. We are not doing that, and so that is the only reason I believe that the federal government need to get involved.
And so let me ask you about the speaker being ousted. This all has taken place just in the last day or so. With Kevin McCarthy. What'd you make of that?
I have been so much trying to focus on my race that I was really trying not to pay attention to it, but I had to. It actually made me question the type of things that happen in government and with taxpayer dollars and what we're doing. But I will say this, we know that nothing is impossible, and we shouldn't think that these kinds of things will or will not happen. But I certainly had to think about going there, because I'll tell you this, when I came to the State House, I wondered and hoped that I would find more people that were willing to stand up for people like myself there, and I did find them. I have had a chance to go to Washington since I've announced. I do believe that there are some good people in Washington that do care about the people that they serve. So I don't think that they're all like that, that would allow things like that to happen. I just had to believe that this is the right time for me to step up to seek higher office and to run for Congress and to serve at a higher level. So that's really where I was with it, because you have to know, with running a race at this pace and coming in as I have at this time, I have to focus on what's happening in the race.
Let me ask you about just government spending, because they passed the continuing resolution to prevent the shutdown over the weekend.
Yes.
And so, but this is going to be coming up in November again, unless they can pass bills to prevent, a potential shutdown again. And so I'm wondering, where are you on federal government spending? I know that the national debt is now over $33 trillion. So what's your thought on that, and where spending needs to be?
Well, it would, you've got me at the possibility of a shutdown. It really would be a terrible shame for something like that to happen when we look at what it could mean to those federal workers that would lose their paychecks and not be able to provide for their families. So, when we look at federal spending, we definitely don't want to be in a deficit, right? So I just would hope that the federal government would take into consideration all the people that it would hurt, and the direction that we're going with spending. Because as you mentioned, where we are today is not where we want to be. And I certainly would hope that they would stop putting, politics of it over the people that we serve.
My last question to you is about foreign policy, and one of the key questions nowadays is continuing funding for the Ukraine's response to Russia's attack and ongoing attacks. Where are you on that?
There again, we're talking about spending. I do believe that we have to take care of our own. I do believe that it is necessary to help others, but I do believe that we have to take care of our own, our borders, our country, before spending in other areas. I'm not going to say that I don't believe that we shouldn't support Ukraine, but I do believe we have to look at matters here in the U.S. before we continue spending elsewhere.
As we sit here today, there's going to be another special session in the State House, and you're still there, of course. And so I wanted to ask you about one of the key issues that's going to be coming up, and that is school choice and taxpayer-financed education savings accounts that would allow some public school students to attend private school by receiving some state tax dollars. Where are you on that?
Well, I've always supported public education, and so I'm always going to be a no when it comes to vouchers. I do believe that with the couple school districts I have left in the district, I've talked to my superintendents, and it just wouldn't be good when it comes to the basic allotment and what is provided for those students to the school district. The voucher itself will not be enough for a family to provide a private school education. And one of my school districts, it has choice of school already. So this is not about choice. It is, to me, about defunding public education. And I do believe when we look at our education system here in Texas, we have to fund it properly. There were some promises that we made back in the '86 legislative session, and we have to make sure that we are coming through and making sure that that is sustainable. What we promised the people and in education, we have to come through with those promises. We certainly didn't look nearly enough at teacher pay raises, and I just want to make sure that our teachers, active and retired, are taken care of. So I hope you can tell that I do feel strongly about it, that this isn't the answer.
The governor has campaigned on this issue, saying that he believes that it will, when you have education savings accounts, that it will make public schools even stronger by providing this competition. What do you say to that?
I don't believe that is the truth at all. I just don't see how providing a voucher and an education savings account is giving to public education. And we know for a fact that that will not be what happens. And I've talked to my superintendents, and they've said that it will not help even with enrollment, with students staying in those classrooms. So, and when you look at the possibility of an average single mom of 3 saying, I could just start my own charter school, there's all sorts of examples that would really work against public education as it stands today in Texas.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is the potential for Speaker Dade Phelan to vacate the chair, if you will. How concerned are you that some Republicans in the House are going to try to remove him from the speakership?
I certainly don't think that is the direction that we need to go as a body. I will just say that I think one of the things that I know we have to get away from is the divisiveness and the division. There's so many different groups and organizations, factions within the body, but we've got to come together, and we shouldn't go back to try to get the speaker. There's one thing that always kind of struck me as I've served in the House. So many people saying Texas is not like Washington. We just saw what happened in Washington. You mentioned it today as we sat here and talked with the Speaker of the House. That is the last thing that we need to go back to, when we need to be going back to deal with and to fight against vouchers. We need to be fighting to make sure we're properly funding education, and that we go there with teachers and students in mind, not about ousting our leader.
Do you think that would throw the House into chaos if that happens?
I think it's a strong possibility that that is what would happen, but that's the last thing we need to go there for. If the call is about education, one thing that I've always said too is that it deserves a real conversation, deserves a real debate on the floor. Let's talk about it. I think that's the kind of approach that I bring when it comes to talking about the issues, really wanting to hear and listen to each other. And I just don't think that we need to be headed back for a third special session to talk about ousting our leader. I think this is definitely has to be about the issue of funding education, public education properly.
Democratic State Representative Rhetta Bowers of Garland, running for Congress. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.